I'd put on the white uniform, buttoned it up slowly, one by one, like I had all the time in the world, looked at myself in the staff bathroom mirror of that five-star hotel and saw a 58-year-old woman with rough hands, permanent dark circles that don't go away no matter how much you sleep, and hair pulled back the way you wear it when nobody's supposed to notice you. I told myself, "You can do this, Helen. You've done harder things. You've survived worse." And I walked into that ballroom. 200 guests. White orchids on every table. French champagne. A string quartet in the corner playing something classical I couldn't name. Everything flawlessly expensive. Everything perfectly curated. Everything completely foreign to me. And there I was, moving through it all in a catering uniform, refilling water glasses. My son was getting married that night, and I was there as a hired hand. With one condition, don't tell anyone you're his mother. 3 days before the wedding, my son Michael showed up at my apartment without calling first. He didn't knock the way he used to as a kid. 3 quick taps that I could recognize from anywhere in the apartment. He just used his key, the one I'd given him years ago, and appeared in the kitchen doorway while I was scrubbing the floor on my hands and knees. He was wearing a suit I'd never seen. Dark, perfectly cut. Shoes that caught the light, his hair styled differently. He looked older. He looked like he belonged somewhere else. "Mom," he said. And already in that one word, there was something I didn't recognize. Something cooled down, something distant. I got up off the floor, dried my hands on the rag, smiled. I thought, finally. Finally he's going to tell me where I'm sitting, what I should wear, what time to arrive. I'd been waiting for this conversation for months. "I need to talk to you about the wedding," he said. "Of course. Go ahead." He didn't sit down. He stayed standing near the door, the way you stand when you're not planning to stay long. "You're not going to be able to come as a guest." The floor shifted under me. Not literally, but that's exactly how it felt. Like the linoleum in my kitchen had turned into cold water and I was sinking without understanding how. "What do you mean?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "Ashley's family is different, Mom. They're on another level. Her father's business partners, they're friends. It's not the kind of environment where you'd feel comfortable." I wanted to say a lot of things. I wanted to tell him I'd worked in rooms exactly like that for 20 years, that I knew every corner of that world even if I'd always entered through the service entrance. But I didn't say anything. I just waited. "And honestly," he continued, dropping his voice slightly, "you always smell like cleaning products. It doesn't matter how much you shower, Mom. It gets into the skin. People notice." I felt my fingers freeze around the damp rag. "But there's an option," he said then, and pulled an envelope from his inside jacket pocket. He set it on the kitchen table right between the sugar bowl and the ceramic salt shaker we'd bought together at a flea market when he was 12. "The hotel needs extra catering staff for the evening. I already talked to the coordinator. They'll bring you on as temporary help. You'd make $200. You'd be there. You'd see me get married. But," he paused, "don't tell anyone you're my mother." I looked at him. I looked at the envelope. I looked at the salt shaker. "Michael, please don't make this difficult, Mom. It's already stressful enough to coordinate everything." I picked up the envelope. I don't know why I picked it up. I think my hands just moved on their own, the way they've always moved, without asking my head for permission first. He said thank you in a way that didn't sound like gratitude. It sounded like relief, and he left. I stood in my kitchen smelling like floor cleaner, holding a temporary employment form, listening to the sound of his footsteps going down the stairs. And I tried to figure out exactly when I had lost my son, not when he'd moved out, but when he had moved away from me. Let me tell you who I was before that envelope. My name is Helen. I'm 58 years old. I was a wife for 13 years, a mother from the first second I held Michael, and a widow at 41. My husband Gary, a plumber, the most straightforward, decent man I've ever known, had a heart attack on a Tuesday morning while he was eating breakfast. No warning signs. No time to say anything. Gone. I was left with Michael, who was 10 years old, and a mortgage that Gary and I had calculated on 2 incomes. I had $11,000 in our checking account. That same week, I started looking for work. I got hired at a commercial cleaning company first. Early morning shifts, 5 days a week. The pay was low but steady. When Michael started high school and the costs multiplied, school supplies, sports fees, a laptop that his teachers required, I added a second job. Overnight housekeeping at an airport hotel, 3 nights a week. On the nights I worked both jobs, I slept 4 hours. I never told Michael I was sleeping 4 hours. He was a teenager. That wasn't something he needed to carry around. When he was 17 and started talking about colleges, about careers, about where he wanted his life to go, I'd already been quietly running the numbers for months. The business school he wanted, the one with the national rankings and the MBA pipeline and the alumni network that actually opened doors, cost $145,000 for the full 4-year program. I had $26,000 saved. I took a third job. Weekend shifts cleaning corporate offices in the financial district. I got home Sunday nights with my feet so swollen I sometimes couldn't wear regular shoes on Monday morning, but the numbers were slowly, painfully closing. I sold Gary's wedding ring. It took me 3 attempts to actually walk into a jewelry store and hand it over. I drove to 2 different shops and sat in the parking lot and drove away before I finally went inside a third one. $1,400. I put it in an envelope with his name written on it and added it to the savings. That same year, I developed a problem with my wisdom tooth, an infection that a dentist told me needed immediate attention, extraction, and a crown. Total cost, $1,800. I didn't get it treated. I managed it with ibuprofen for 2 years, sometimes 3 pills instead of 2 when the pain got sharp at night. I rinsed with salt water. I learned which side of my face to sleep on to keep the pressure tolerable. When Michael graduated, he told me all his classmates were wearing designer suits to the ceremony. He didn't ask me directly. He just mentioned it a few times in the weeks leading up to it. I understood what he was saying without him saying it. I bought the suit. Hugo Boss. $680. I used the money I'd been setting aside to replace the brake pads on my car, which had been grinding for 2 months. 6 weeks later, I had a minor accident on the highway. The car in front of me stopped short and my brakes responded too slowly. I rear-ended them at low speed. The front of my car crumpled. I hit my chest on the steering wheel. I went to the ER, not the mechanic. The doctor said it was a mild contusion, sent me home with painkillers and told me to rest. That night, lying in bed with my chest aching, I thought about Michael's face when he tried on that suit, the way he looked at himself in the mirror, the slow smile that started in his eyes before it reached his mouth. And I told myself, it was worth it. That's what I believed then. The phone call I remember most clearly from all those years is the one I got when he was accepted to the program. It was after 11 at night. I was just getting back from the hotel shift when my phone rang. Mom, I got in. Mom, I got in. We both cried for 10 minutes without saying anything else, just breathing together on the phone. We did it, he said finally. We did it together, Mom. I kept that voicemail saved on my phone. On the hardest days, and there were a lot of them, I'd listen to it while I waited for the bus home. It helped me remember what all of it was for. I don't listen to it anymore. There are things you don't want to see even when they're right in front of you. You look straight at them and call them something else. You say he's tired, he's stressed, he's busy with the program. That's just how young people are when they're building their lives. When Ashley came to meet me for the first time about 2 years ago, I noticed something in her from the moment she walked in. It wasn't cruelty exactly. It was assessment. She looked at me the way you look at an apartment you're considering renting, scanning the corners, checking the condition, calculating whether it's worth the trouble. She was polite. She smiled. She said my apartment had a lot of personality. But over that entire dinner, she didn't ask me a single thing about myself. Not what I'd done for work, not how I'd met Gary, not what I liked to read or watch or cook. She talked about her family's properties, about her father's business expansion, about the wedding they were already loosely planning, even though there was no official proposal yet. Michael didn't ask me anything about myself that night either. I set the table. I cooked the pot roast Michael had asked for specifically, the one I'd been making since he was small. I served. I smiled. I asked questions about their plans. I did everything a mother does when she wants her son to feel at home. After they left, I found a text on my phone. Michael had sent it to me by mistake. It was meant for Ashley. It said, "Sorry that took so long. I know it's awkward, but it's just once. You won't have to do it regularly." I read it 3 times standing in the same spot by the door. Then I saved it in a folder on my phone I labeled, "Just in case." I didn't respond. I didn't mention it the next time we spoke. I just filed it away and kept going. Weeks later, I overheard the end of a phone call Michael was having with Ashley's father. I'd come in from grocery shopping with both hands full and couldn't announce myself. Michael was facing the window, not seeing me. Ashley's father was asking about Michael's family background. Do you have siblings? Will your parents be at the wedding? And Michael said in a completely normal, steady voice, No, I'm an only child. My parents both passed away when I was young. I set the grocery bags down on the floor without making a sound, walked back to the hallway, closed the door quietly behind me. I stood in the hallway of my own apartment with my back against the wall, looking at the ceiling. He had erased me, in one sentence, so the image would stay clean. I breathed. I counted to 10. I went back inside and said I'd forgotten something at the store, stepped out again, and in those 3 minutes in the stairwell I cried, fast and silent, with my mouth pressed against the back of my hand. 5 minutes, no more. Then I went back in, put away the groceries, and put water on to boil, but I added that moment to my mental folder of just in case. And I started paying closer attention than I ever had before. When I told my sister Carol about the employment form, the catering job, the $200, the condition about not telling anyone, I expected her to be outraged. Instead, she sighed and said, Helen, you know how these wealthy families are. They have their own rules. Maybe Michael's under a lot of pressure right now. Don't cause a scene when he's just starting out. My neighbor Linda, who I'd had coffee with almost every Friday for 15 years, said, Honey, when sons get married, they shift toward the wife's world. It's just how it works. Give him time, he'll come back around. A woman I worked with said, You see the problem, but you don't see what he's dealing with. Being around those people with a mother who cleans hotels, that's not easy for him either. My pastor, who had known me since Michael was a baby, looked at me with tired eyes and said, Forgiveness is more powerful than justice, Helen. Don't let pride destroy what's left of your relationship. Everyone said the same thing, different words, same message underneath. Be the bigger person. Don't make a scene. Think about him. And I sat with each of those conversations and nodded and thought, when does anyone think about me? But I kept it inside. Then Ashley came to see me. She found me at work, at the hotel where I was doing a regular shift, on a Wednesday afternoon. She asked the front desk to let me know she was there. She wanted a few minutes in private. We sat in the staff break room, her in a camel-colored cashmere coat and a bag that cost more than my monthly paycheck. Me in my work uniform with my hair back, hands still faintly smelling like all-purpose cleaner even though I'd washed them twice. She spoke slowly, with the careful, measured tone of someone who's been trained not to show the upper or lower edges of anything. Helen, I understand this is hard for you. I genuinely do. And I want you to know I don't hold any of this against you personally. She waited for me to say thank you. I didn't. But you have to understand our situation. This wedding isn't just a personal celebration. It has implications for my father's business relationships. The guests are partners, investors, people who matter to the future we're building. The image we project that evening matters. She folded her hands over her bag. You're a hardworking woman. That's admirable. But in that specific context, you don't fit. And Michael knows that, even if he doesn't know how to say it. Pause. Do you want Michael to be happy? More than anything, I said. And that was true. It had always been true. Then be reasonable. Don't disrupt the image by being present among people like his guests. Michael loves you, but sometimes love has to be practical. She gave me a small smile, the kind someone gives when they think they've just closed a deal. She stood up. She left. I sat in that plastic chair for 20 minutes without moving, hands folded in my lap, the hum of the fluorescent light above me like a low, steady pressure, and something shifted inside me. Not broke, not exploded, just moved into a different, colder, cleaner position. I thought, fine, I'll be reasonable, completely reasonable, but on my terms. There's something nobody knew about me, not Michael, not Carol, not Linda, not my pastor, not Ashley. When I started working in hotels 20 years ago, I noticed something that most people who work in those buildings never pay attention to. Hotels are money machines. Every room, every event, every wedding like the one that was being planned, it all generates numbers that the employees who keep everything running will never see. But I saw them. Not because I had special access, because I paid attention. I listened to conversations in hallways. I read documents that executives left on conference tables before I cleaned the rooms. I watched the owners, the investors, the general managers who came through on property reviews. And over time I learned how that world actually worked from the inside. 11 years ago, when I had a small amount of savings that Michael didn't need, he was working, he was stable. I made my first investment. Small. $800 in shares of a regional hotel group. I had help from a lawyer named Don, a quiet, careful man who handled the affairs of a friend of mine and who never overcharged anyone in his life. The shares went up. I reinvested. They dropped. I held. They went up more. I reinvested more. Month by month for 11 years, with the patience you develop when waiting is the only tool you have, I bought into the Grand Meridian Group. 12 hotels across 4 states, 340 rooms in the flagship property, 4 event spaces in the main building. I did it through a holding company that Dawn and I set up together, a clean, quiet name with no visible connection to Helen Marsh, hotel housekeeper. The founder of the chain is a man named Robert Calloway. 67 years old, white hair, the voice of someone who has run a lot of meetings. When I'd accumulated enough shares that the pattern behind the holding company became worth investigating, he asked to meet whoever was behind it. We sat in his office. He looked at me for a long moment. He asked me how I'd done it. I told him. By paying attention while I cleaned his floors. We've been genuine partners since then. I own 51% of the chain. He runs it because he knows how and because I never wanted visibility. I wanted my money working quietly, the way I'd always worked. When I received the venue confirmation that Michael's wedding would be held at the Grand Meridian flagship, my flagship, I sat still in front of my phone for a long moment. Then I called Robert. I told him everything. No drama, just facts, numbers, and dates. There was a long silence on his end. "Helen," he said finally, "do you want to do what I think you want to do?" "Yes," I said. "Are you absolutely sure?" "Completely." "Then tell me what you need from me." Over the next 2 weeks, I prepared every detail carefully. I reviewed the ownership documents with Dawn. I prepared a termination notice for the logistics company where Michael worked, a regional director position he believed he'd earned entirely on his own merits, without knowing that I'd spoken with the CEO 8 months earlier when that same CEO was a guest at the hotel and asked me privately if I knew any sharp young people with a management profile worth developing. I also prepared the check, $87,000. The down payment on the house Michael and Ashley had chosen. It was my wedding gift, signed, ready. I put it in my bag next to the documents. The night before the wedding, I ironed my catering uniform. I went to bed at 10. I slept straight through to 6 in the morning. Genuinely slept, which hadn't happened in months. Peace arrives sometimes when the decision is already made and there's nothing left to wait for. I arrived at the hotel at 4 in the afternoon for the setup shift. I arranged crystal glassware on white tablecloths. I folded cloth napkins into careful shapes. I poured water into pitchers. I straightened chairs. Nobody looked at me. In a uniform, I'm invisible. I always have been. And that evening more than ever. Michael arrived at 6 with his groomsmen. I saw him from across the room, through the arch of white flowers 2 of my coworkers had assembled that afternoon. He looked beautiful. Nervous in the good way. The way you're nervous when something genuinely matters to you. He was laughing at something one of his friends said, with that laugh of his that's been the same since he was a little boy. Quick, eyes closed for a second. He looked across the room and his gaze passed over me the way it passes over any catering staff, without registering, without stopping. He looked away and kept walking. I didn't feel anything in that moment. Or I felt everything at once and my body didn't know how to sort it. I'm not sure I can tell the difference anymore. The ceremony was in the garden, with lights strung against the dark October sky and the string quartet playing something I recognized from a movie I couldn't remember the name of. I served champagne during cocktail hour. I caught pieces of conversations, portfolio valuations, a house in the Hamptons, prep school applications, the name of a senator someone apparently knew personally. Nobody asked my name. Dinner started at 9. The speeches began at 10. Ashley's father went first. Long, emotional, full of references to legacy and family values and the future being built by this union. Applause. The best man told a story from Michael's grad school days. Laughter. Applause. And then Robert Calloway stood up from his table. He'd been invited as a courtesy guest by Ashley's father, who was a longtime client of the hotel group, and took the microphone with his usual unhurried ease. "Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Robert Calloway, founder of the Grand Meridian Hotel Group. And tonight, In this room that I consider one of the finest spaces we've ever built, I want to do something I should have done publicly a long time ago." He paused, looked around the room. "I want to thank my partner, the person who owns 51% of this hotel group, the woman without whom this building, this specific room where all of you are sitting right now, would not exist in its current form." People turned, looking toward the main tables, expecting someone important in evening wear. Robert pointed at me, at the catering staff member standing against the far wall with a water pitcher. Helen Marsh, investor, business owner, and the most patient, most clear-eyed person I've had the privilege of working with in 30 years in this industry. The silence that followed had weight to it. I watched Michael's face lose all its color in the span of about 3 seconds. His jaw tightened. His eyes found mine, and when they did, he couldn't hold it. Ashley's mouth was open. Her father was blinking slowly, recalculating something behind his eyes. I walked to the center of the room. Steady. Robert handed me the microphone with a quiet nod. I stood in front of 200 people and my son who had handed me a $200 employment form. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. My hands didn't shake. I spoke the way water moves when it's very deep, slowly, without effort, covering everything. "Good evening. My name is Helen Marsh. I've worked in hotels for 22 years. The last 11 of those years in this group. I've cleaned these floors. I've folded these napkins. I've worked events exactly like this one." Pause. "I've also spent 11 years buying shares in this hotel group. A small amount at first. Then more, month by month, for 11 years, with patience. Tonight I own 51% of this building, and the 11 other properties in the Grand Meridian network." The murmur that moved through the room was slow and wide, like a tide. This week the groom, Michael, my son, gave me a temporary employment contract. $200 to work his wedding as a caterer, with one specific condition: don't tell anyone you're my mother. I heard sharp intakes of breath, a chair moving. Tonight I came as a member of the catering staff. I'm also the majority owner of the space where this wedding is being held. I turned to Michael, looked directly at him, and didn't look away. "Michael, I have a check in my bag for $87,000. It was the wedding gift I'd prepared for you. The down payment on the house you and Ashley chose." I opened my bag, took out the check, held it where the room could see it. "It's void." I tore it in half, slowly, evenly, without taking my eyes off my son. The sound of that paper tearing in that silence was the most final thing I've ever heard. "There's something else you should know. The regional director position at Meridian Logistics, the job you got 8 months ago, the one you believe you earned on your own, was possible because I spoke with the CEO. You have that job because of my connections, not yours." I took out my phone, made a call. "James, it's Helen. You can go ahead and process the termination we discussed. Thank you." I hung up. "As of right now, Michael, that contract has been ended." Michael's hands were pressed flat on the table like he needed to feel something solid. His eyes were wet. He didn't speak. He couldn't. "And now I'm going to ask all of the guests to please exit the ballroom. This event has concluded. The venue is closing." I turned to the event coordinator standing near the side wall. "Tom, please begin the closeout procedure." Tom nodded once and started issuing quiet instructions to the staff. Ashley's father stood up, red-faced, with the voice of a man who is not accustomed to situations he didn't create. "Now just a minute. Who exactly do you think you—" "I'm the majority owner of this building," I said, without raising my voice, "and I'm respectfully asking you to leave." I held his gaze until he stopped talking. People began to move, some confused, some indignant, a few, oddly, completely silent, like they understood something they couldn't articulate. I walked over to the table where Michael was still sitting, motionless, staring at the two halves of the check on the white tablecloth. I didn't sit down. I didn't hug him. I just stopped in front of him for a moment. "I kept the voicemail," I said quietly, so only he could hear. "The one from the night you got into the program. The one where you said, 'We did it together, Mom.' I listened to it for years on the way home from work." I paused. "I don't need it anymore." I took off the catering apron, folded it the way I always fold things, neatly, out of habit, because habits don't disappear overnight, set it on the table, and I walked out. 4 months have passed. Michael called 87 times in the first 2 weeks. I watched the number climb on my phone with a strange, steady calm, like I was observing something from a distance. Then came the texts, some angry. You had no right to do that in front of everyone. Some confused. When did you have money? Why didn't you ever tell me? Some sent at strange hours with nothing written, just my name. Mom. One at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday that said only, I'm sorry. I read it, I saved it, I didn't respond. Not because I don't love him, I do. The love for a child doesn't disappear because that child disappoints you. God, I wish it were that simple. But love without respect isn't a relationship. It's a debt that one person keeps collecting and never pays back. And I had spent too many years being that debt for someone who should have chosen me. Today my life is different. I hired someone to handle the household tasks I no longer need to do myself. I slept 8 hours straight for the first time in years. Genuinely 8 hours, no alarm, no calculating how much time is left before the next shift, and I stayed in bed for an extra few minutes just to know what that felt like. I went to the dentist, got the tooth fixed, the same one I left untreated for 2 years because I couldn't afford $1,800. The dentist asked how long I'd been managing it. When I told him the truth, he was quiet for a moment. He didn't say anything. Sometimes another person's silence is the right response. I traveled alone. I went to Portugal because I'd always wanted to go and there was always a reason not to. I walked along the waterfront in Lisbon one evening in October with the sun going low over the river and the old boats anchored in the distance, and I cried a little, without embarrassment, without covering my face. For the years I didn't allow myself. For how long I confused sacrifice with living. Robert and I are developing 2 new properties. There are meetings, projections, decisions to make. I work because I find it interesting, because I like the feeling of building something, not because I have no other option. That distinction, which sounds small, changes everything about how a day feels. Sometimes I think about Michael, about the boy who slept with the hall light on because he was scared of thunderstorms, and I'd sit in the chair by his bed until his breathing slowed and steadied. About the night he called from the phone in his dorm room, crying. About the face he made when he tried on that suit I couldn't really afford. About the man he became and the man he chose to be. Those aren't the same person. I keep his graduation photo in a drawer, not on the wall. I don't need it on the wall to know that I loved him well and gave everything I had. That doesn't change, but it doesn't obligate me to anything either. If Michael calls someday, not 87 times in 2 weeks, but once, honestly, with nothing he's trying to get from me, I might answer. I don't know yet. It depends on what he has to say. What I do know is what I will never do again. Confuse enduring with loving. For too many years, I believed that suffering quietly was proof of being a good mother. That if I never complained, never asked for anything, just gave and gave and gave, it meant I loved him more. It doesn't. It's just silence. And silence, when it goes on long enough, starts to look like permission. Your dignity doesn't expire. I learned that late, but I learned it. If you're watching this and you recognize something of your own story in mine, if there's someone in your life who treats you as a resource instead of a person, who takes what you give without ever asking what it costs you, I want you to hear this. You are not required to disappear so that someone else can shine. Now tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have shown up to that wedding? Would you have torn that check in front of everyone? Would you have answered any of those 87 calls? Write it in the comments right now. I want to read every single one.